You have $400 million, and your barber thinks you're a retired school teacher who's doing all right for himself. He has cut your hair every 3 weeks for 9 years. He knows your left knee aches when the weather turns, and that your daughter moved to a city you've never learned to love. He does not know the number. And the day he finally does is the day the one honest hour in your week quietly comes to an end. There are two kinds of money, and they don't sit the same way in a room. Loud money walks in announcing itself. It wants the haircut, it wants you to know it could buy the whole shop, and it leaves a tip designed to be remembered. Quiet money walks in, sits down, and asks how the kids' soccer season is going. Quiet money is the 400 million you have never said out loud to anyone who didn't sign a document first. The difference was never about how much you have, it was about how much of it leaks. And for 9 years, none of yours leaked here, in this one chair, under this one pair of hands, because the man holding the scissors had no reason to go looking for it. That's the strange thing about being unknown. It isn't a wall you build, it's a quiet you keep. And the moment that quiet breaks, you find out exactly what it was worth, usually by losing it. If you're the kind of person who would rather own the thing than be seen owning it, I think you already know where to subscribe. Stay with this one, because it isn't really a story about a barbershop. It's a story about the last room where you got to be nobody, and what it cost the morning that room finally learned your name. Start with the chair, because the chair is where all of it held together. You go on Wednesday mornings, not the first appointment, the second 9:20, after the early rush, before the lunch crowd. The shop smells like talc and warm towels. There's a radio tuned to the same station it was tuned to before you ever walked in, and a calendar on the wall that's 2 months behind, and nobody fixes it because nobody minds. For $19 and a $5 tip, you get a haircut. You also get something you can't buy anywhere else at any price. You get an hour where no one in the world is calculating you. The barber asks about your knee. He tells you about his son, who wants to be a pilot now, having wanted to be a marine biologist last spring. You talk about the weather and the road work on the avenue, and whether the diner 2 doors down is as good as it used to be. Ordinary things. The plain currency of an ordinary Wednesday. He thinks you taught for 30 years. You never told him that. He built it himself, the way people do, out of your patience and your worn shoes, and the careful way you count out exact change. You let him keep the picture, because the picture was comfortable, and because the picture was a kind of armor you never had to pay for. And it was honest in both directions. He didn't perform for you either. He told you when a cut came out rushed because his son had been up sick. He complained about the rent on the shop, and the chain place that opened on the corner and undercut him by $4. You were two ordinary men talking across one small, ordinary transaction, and the smallness of it was the exact thing that made it real. Nobody negotiates with a retired school teacher. Nobody manages him. He just gets his hair cut and goes home. Here's what almost no one notices about being known. It has very little to do with how often you're seen. This man has had his hands on your head 15 minutes at a time, every 3 weeks, for 9 years. Do the arithmetic, and it's more than 30 hours of contact, more than 150 conversations, more time than you've spent with most of the people you'd call friends. And in all of it, he never came within a continent of the number. Because closeness reads character. It does not read a balance sheet. He learned that you're calm, that you tip the same whether the cut runs late or comes out perfect, that you always hold the door for the man on the walker. None of that carries a dollar sign. You can stand beside a person for a decade and know the exact shape of their patience and never once know what they're worth, because worth doesn't appear in any of the places affection thinks to look. That was the quiet you kept, not a secret you guarded, a blank you simply never filled in. And it wasn't only him. The woman at the pharmacy counter files you under regular customer, exact change, no trouble. The teller who has watched a modest checking account tick along for years has no idea it's the smallest room in a very large house. Your own brother thinks you're doing fine and worries, gently, that you're not doing better. You let every one of them keep their picture, the same way you let the barber keep his, because each blank space was a door you could still walk through as an ordinary man. Most people spend their whole lives trying to get those spaces filled in. You spent yours quietly protecting them. Now climb the thing with me, level by level, because the number didn't arrive all at once, and neither did the silence. At the bottom, there was nothing to hide. You were 26, the account held $31 on a bad Wednesday, and being unknown cost you exactly nothing because there was nothing to be unknown about. Anonymity is free when you're broke. Everyone has it, and nobody wants it. Back then, you'd have traded all of it to be seen. Then came the building years. You took the job that paid in ownership instead of applause, a thin sliver of something small that you believed in back when believing was unfashionable. Your paycheck stayed modest. Your friends got the better apartments and the newer cars and the weekends that looked good from the outside, and you got a number on a piece of paper that didn't spend, didn't show, and didn't impress anyone at a dinner table. For a long stretch, you looked, to everyone watching, like a man quietly falling behind. You let them think that too. It was the same armor, worn a little longer. There was a Wednesday, somewhere in the middle of all that waiting, when you nearly broke ranks. You stood in a showroom with the keys to a car you could suddenly almost justify, and for about 90 seconds you let yourself feel what it would be like to be read, finally, as a man who'd arrived. Then you set the keys back on the desk and drove your paid-off sedan home. It wasn't willpower, exactly. It was understanding that the moment you bought the look, you'd start paying for it in a currency that compounds the wrong way, and that the version of you who got to keep all of this was the version who walked out of that showroom with nothing in his hands. This is the part the barber would never have guessed, because it never once touched the surface of your life. The thing you owned grew the way quiet money grows before you woke up, while you slept, asking no one's permission and making no noise at all. It crossed $1 million on paper one year and you told nobody. It crossed 10 and you bought yourself a slightly better pair of boots and nothing else changed. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday, at 3:11 inches the afternoon, a sale closed and a wire cleared, and the sliver became $400 million. You were standing at a pharmacy counter when the confirmation came through, paying $4.16 for cough drops. You finished paying. You took your change. You drove home with the radio off, and that was the entire celebration. The number didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like a door clicking shut very softly somewhere behind you, the number nobody sees. Least of all the man who cuts your hair. And this is where the discipline really lived, not in earning it, but in what you refused to do the day after. Because the easiest thing in the world, once the number is real, is to let it start showing. To upgrade the car so the driveway tells the story for you. To find the watch, the address, the table at the front of the restaurant. Everyone who comes into money is handed the same quiet invitation to start performing it. You declined. You kept the $19 haircut. You kept the second appointment at 9:20. You kept the picture the barber had built. And you understood something most people never get to learn. The look of wealth is almost always rented. And the people renting it are paying a little more every month for the privilege of being read correctly by strangers. You know exactly what that other version looks like, because you've watched it up close for years. Dylan does the opposite of everything you've done, and he does all of it loudly. Dylan announces, the car is leased, the watch is on a card, and the vacation is on the feed before the plane has finished landing. Everyone in Dylan's life knows his number, or believes they do, which is worse, because the number they see is the rented one. Dylan is treated precisely like the figure he projects. The host remembers his name. The dealership calls him before the new models land. Rooms turn a little when he comes through the door. He paid for every bit of that, and he is still paying for it, and the gap between the man people see and the man who signs the statements widens a little with every year that passes. Dylan could not sit in that chair for $19 and disappear. He wouldn't know how. He has never had an honest hour in his adult life, because everyone who meets Dylan meets the number first, and the number does all the talking before he's said a word. He would tell you he's winning. On an ordinary Wednesday, while you're getting your hair cut for the price of 2 coffees, Dylan is moving money between 3 accounts to keep the surface smooth. You don't judge him for it. You just notice where the money goes when nobody's looking. With Dylan, it goes out the way it came in. only faster. You watched him do it once at a dinner, the whole table going quiet while he reached for the check with both hands, the way a man does when the paying is the point and the meal was only the excuse. Everyone thanked him, everyone was a little impressed. And you sat there knowing the gesture had cost him more than he had, that he'd carried on a statement for a month, and that not one person at that table would ever learn the price of the warmth they'd just felt. That's loud money in a single motion. It buys the moment and finances the rest. Then there's Priya, who is the most misread person you know. Priya out-earns nearly everyone in her building out-earned you too, back when there was still an earning to compare. On paper, in the eyes of the whole office, Priya won. The title, the salary, the desk by the window, everyone else wanted. And the account drains down to almost nothing by the 28th of every month, because a high income spent in full is just a fast-moving river that never becomes a lake. Priya is known as successful. Priya is not wealthy. Those two words have been quietly at war her entire career, and almost no one around her can tell the two apart, because the difference doesn't show. It never shows. That is the entire point. Notice this, because everyone misses it. The world treats Priya like money and treats you like a retired teacher, and only one of you can stop working tomorrow morning and never feel the floor move. The one the world reads as rich is the one who can least afford a quiet month. The one it overlooks entirely is the one who was free the whole time. You remember the afternoon she got the big raise, how she announced it without ever saying a number, just a look, just a lunch she insisted on covering. By the following Wednesday, the raise had already been spent forward into a nicer lease and a standing reservation, the way a raise always is for someone who treats income as a starting line instead of a tool. Priya didn't get poorer that day. She got more visibly successful and exactly as unfree, and to everyone watching, the two things looked like one. The single person who would have understood you was Mr. Ellis, 3 doors down, who drove the same dull sedan for 19 years and mowed his own lawn well into his 80s. The street had him filed under getting by. Pleasant old man, modest pension, nothing much to see, the kind of neighbor you wave to and never wonder about. When he passed, the quiet came undone all at once, the way it does when the one keeping it is gone. He had owned half the block and a good deal more besides, and he'd given most of it away in silence, into a fund that put local kids through school and could not be traced back to him while he was alive. He had spent 50 years being underestimated entirely on purpose, and from the look of him at the diner every morning, he had enjoyed every minute of it. Mr. Ellis was the proof. You can carry an enormous number your whole life and let exactly no one feel the weight of knowing it. And the not knowing isn't a lie you tell the people around you. It can be a gift you hand them, the gift of treating you like a person, because you never gave them a reason to treat you like a sum. For 9 years, that gift ran both ways. The quiet didn't just spare the people around you from doing math on you, it spared you from living inside the math. You got to stand in a hardware aisle on an ordinary Wednesday and be nobody in particular. You got to be asked about your knee instead of your portfolio. You got to find out who was kind to a retired schoolteacher of modest means, which is a thing the very visibly rich almost never learn about anyone, because they only ever meet people who have already met their number first. The 400 million bought your freedom. The quiet bought you the company of people who didn't know they were being generous to a fortune. That second thing shows up on no statement anywhere, and it's the one you'd have fought hardest to keep if anyone had thought to tell you it was the thing at risk. So here is the morning it broke. It was an ordinary Wednesday, 9:20, the second appointment. You were in the chair with the cape clipped at your neck and your eyes half closed, and a man 2 seats over was reading something off his phone, half to himself, the way people do in waiting rooms. Your name was in it. Your full name, attached to the sale, attached to the number, in one of those sentences you'd always hoped would stay in the corner of the world that reads those sentences. The scissors paused, just for a second. You felt it more than you heard it, the half-beat of a hand recalculating everything it thought it understood about the man in the chair. He didn't say anything. That was nearly the worst of it. He finished the cut, as careful as ever, and brushed your collar clean, And when you handed him the same $5 tip you had handed him every 3 weeks for 9 years, something crossed his face that had never been there before. Not greed, not even surprise, really. Something gentler than that, and far more permanent. And just like that, the honest hour was over. Here's what that actually costs. The next Wednesday, he asked about your knee, the same way he always had. But there was a new carefulness underneath it now, a faint tilt. The posture a person takes when they realize they are standing next to money instead of next to a man. The easy jokes came a half step more polite. The comfortable silences filled in with something that wanted to be useful. He called you sir once, and caught it, and you both pretended he hadn't. Nothing was wrong. That's the cruelty of it. He was kind. He was the same decent man he had always been. And the thing between you was simply, quietly, permanently finished, not because either of you wanted it to be, but because a number had walked into the room and sat down in the chair where a person used to sit. You tried, the next few weeks, to wave it off. You told yourself it was small, that a haircut is a haircut, that nothing about the 400 million had moved by a single dollar. All of that was true and none of it helped, because the thing that had moved wasn't in any account. It was the last ordinary room, the one place the number hadn't followed you into, and now it had pulled up a chair and made itself comfortable, and it was never going to stand up and leave again. This is the tax nobody ever quotes you. Being known doesn't cost you money. You have more of that than the price of almost anything. It costs you the rooms where you got to not be your number. It costs you the people who knew the shape of your patients and never the size of your account, and who treated you accordingly, which is to say, like a human being, and not like a transaction in a good coat. You spent 11 years and a great deal of invisible discipline buying your freedom, and the freedom was real. But the quiet was the part that let you walk around inside an ordinary life and be met with ordinary kindness that wasn't quietly doing math on you. And the quiet, it turns out, was the more fragile of the two. Money you can rebuild. A blank space in someone's picture of you, once it's been filled in, never empties out again. That's the trade almost nobody warns you about. You can have the 400 million, or you can have the chair where the 400 million didn't follow you in. For 9 years, you had both, and you didn't know it was the rarest thing you owned until the morning it was gone. There's a version of this story where you never go back to that shop, where you find a new chair across town and start the 9 years over from a clean blank. Maybe you will. But you already know the blank won't hold forever anywhere, and that every quiet you keep is sitting on a clock you don't control. So here's the only question left for you. When the number finally arrives, and for the patient kind, it usually does, which will you guard more carefully? The money you spent so long building, or the few quiet rooms where nobody knows you built it? Build it quiet.